So, let's take a bow. And so, feet shoulder width apart, knees bent, hips tucked. So again, we'll do a short warm up, and then jump into the 13 postures, the transition. So let the shoulders drop, breath in the belly, and bend forward, straighten the legs. Exhale, roll down. Come back up. Hands on the kidneys, lean back. And back to center. And again, straighten the legs. Roll down. Back up. Hands on kidneys, lean back. And again. Back up. Hands on kidneys, lean back. And back to center, knees bent, hips tucked. And one last time, going side to side. Straighten the legs. Back to center. And come back up. Hands on kidneys, lean back. And sitting back. And carry the tiger. hold, shoulders relaxed, knees are bent, hips are tucked. And drop. Halt. Now, play the pipa. So shift, turn, forward into the knee. And halt. One more set. Hold, back to center. Now, horse stance. Squat and push your knees apart. Get the stretch of the inner thighs. And squat. And shift. And shift. Toes up. And shift. And back to center. Walk the feet in. Whew. So, Now basically we're going to close off this look at the 13 postures by taking a deep dive into transitions, right? So again, the thing to remember about the 13 postures is that essentially set on a square. So you want to start with that idea in mind. You're sitting in the middle of, or you're standing in the middle of a square with lines connecting your feet to the front, back, and to the sides, and then to the diagonals. So you just want to keep those 8 lines in mind, because our feet are going to be on those 8 lines at all times. There's no in between. So, and the general rule is, of course, front foot points in direction of your intent, rear foot points to the diagonal of that direction. So if you take your square, that's my front. When I take my stance, my front foot is pointing towards the front, rear foot is pointed towards the diagonal, and I'm sitting 70% on the rear, 30% on the front. Right? So that's our basic, that's the standard stance. So the transitions are always going to be, how do we go from whatever foot position we're in to that particular foot position? So if I'm standing this way and I want to go do a 180-degree turn, the question is, how do I put my front foot from the cardinal that it is now? And then if I want to foot this way, and this is going to be my supporting leg, so the rear leg, once I've finished my turn, I need to bring my foot so that it points to the diagonal, so that when I shift, I'm now in correct position. Right? So it's a very simple exercise in geometry.
Before we do that turn, standing in a regular stance,
Yep.
Where do you position
Okay.
in relation?
So yeah, what is the relationship of the feet? So that's a really good question. So as a standard rule, what you want is to be able for the front foot to be able to slide all the way back without hitting your own heel. So if your foot is too inwards and you can't draw it in, what you're basically doing is you're closing off your hips, right? So your hips, you're basically doing this, you're doing a ballet stance. So you want to always be able to basically be sitting on that rear leg, and the foot needs to be able to slide back and forth without hitting your own heel, and that's where it goes. So that gives you enough of a spread of the leg so that you can feel, right, that when I'm sitting here, there's an opening of the waist. There's room in the hip joint, right? If you're here, you can feel that you're actually closing the hip joint. So it's here. If you're too far out, now it's too large, and you actually can't. You're not standing here. I'm slightly leaning on my front leg, and I can't pick it up, right? Because you want it to be where your leg swings naturally and just floats onto the ground. So even though there's 70-30, all I need to do is shift the weight slightly, and then this foot is free. Right, so the length of the step is determined by the swing of the hip. Here. If it's further, it means that now I'm leaning onto that front leg. Right here, I can't pick up my foot. I'd have to go way back in order to pick it up, because I brought my weight too far forward onto the front. My step is too long. It has to be here. Now I'm free to pick it up. So I'm 100% here, even though I'm placed my foot, now I shift slightly, so it's 70-30, but I still have the option of leaning onto the rear leg and picking it up. If my foot is even like an inch too far, then I don't have that option anymore. Now I'm not balanced. I have to really lean back to pick up the foot. Does that make sense? So basically, it's like the classic way of saying it, you keep a fist of distance between each heel so that you have that pass through. And then the other kind of ironclad rule is the length of your step is determined by the swing of your hip. So it's not stepping forward, it's swinging the hip and letting the foot land where it needs to be in order, depending on the bend of your leg. And this is why we see in things like drag down and brush knee, the move starts with a squat. Because, so if I'm here, right, standing up, swing the leg from the hip, so that's my stance. So if I want to take a bigger step, what I need to do is sit down further so that now that swing of the hip takes my foot further. So in brush knee, I need to do a nice deep squat because I want to take a nice long step, right? But it's still determined by the swing of my hip. So if I want to take a longer step, I need a deeper squat at the beginning of the step. So the length of the step is determined by the supporting leg and how deep you go. Does that make sense? Right, so it's always going to be like, you start sitting down, place the foot. And here, right, even though I can still balance on the rear leg if I have to. Because
you're not doing that.
Correct.
Falling forward here.
Correct. So you're never falling into that front foot. You're always sitting first, sending the foot out based on the hip, and then moving forward. So if you can only do a small squat, then you take a small step, right? It's more correct to just do this and then do brush knee up here than it is to fall forward onto that front foot and then do brush knee. If you don't have the muscle strength or the movement in the hips, then it's more correct to think of the step that is dependent on the hips rather than trying in your own head to go, oh no, this has to be a big step and I have to reach forward. Because if you think about putting the foot far, you're going to fall on the foot. So the thought has to be in the hips. The thought has to be, I'm going to squat and then simply open up that hip joint, and that's what gives me the longer step, right? And so you see, this actually goes back to the variations that you can introduce when you're doing the form itself for your own good. You can decide at the beginning, what is going to be more important? What are you going to emphasize? Are you doing the form, right, for energy flow? Are you doing it to relax? Or are you doing it because you're really working on applications? Your step can vary because of that. And it's mostly going to be how much do you want to invest in the hips. So for example, if you only want to do it for energy flow, right, maybe you just want to come here and that's it. Because you want to go through these positions that are reminiscent of the basic posture, for example, right? So you're only going to be here, and then you're going to do brush knee right here, right? And that's correct. That can be a correct way of doing it, because what you're doing is saying, I'm going to just focus on just a nice, loose, open hips. So I don't bother going down and low, because that's not what I'm going for. I'm working on, whatever energy flow there is. So suddenly your brush knee is a lot taller, right? Just remember the rule is, so brush knee is a big step, but the rule is the big step is determined by how low you squat on that supporting leg, right? So stepping comes out of the hips, not the feet. And it's a huge mental thing to remember, right? Just brings everything down. So it's the lower dantian essentially that moves through space supported by the legs. That's what you want. It's not the feet searching for the ground. It's the lower dantian moving through space. Okay? So and by the way, just that is a meditation exercise. Like, I would encourage everybody, and I always do, to simply do that. Walk with that kind of mindset in mind, like of just sitting there, just kind of feeling the leg, placing the foot, paying attention to the shift in weight, right? And really starting to feel like you're shifting that dantian through space, supported by the hips. The rotation of the hip is what determines whether you go straight or if you turn, right? It's a simple rotation on the hip. but you just really pay attention and how soft the foot can be. It just finds the ground, and then you shift the weight. Yeah. So this is just a walking meditation. You just do that, go back and forth, just paying attention to all of that. The breath, the ground under the feet, the foot, as finding the leg as empty as possible. What does that feel like and how it moves through space when it just rests on the ground? And then the difference when it becomes full and it supports the ground. Or it's supporting from the ground, you know? So just that shift in feeling. Notice, right? It's all here. I think this is where some of the public yang style takes some of its rules, you know, like in some classes, you know, they say, okay, the hips should never shift in height. You should never go up and down, and that waist are always at the same level. I think it's because they took those principles from walking meditation, right? From these exercises here, and applied them to the form. Because if you do these walking exercises, your hips don't shift, right? They just stay here. Your dantian is level, and you're just gently moving through space. So then I think what happened is you said, well, take those principles and apply them to doing the form, so that your form starts to look like a walking meditation, right? Because now you can think of, okay, I'm going to do the form, but my waist is never going to dip up and down. Of course, what it means is that your applications and your form start looking are very weak because you have no up and down or no verticality in your movements. Anyway, so let's take a look at transition. So things to remember: the diagonal of the rear leg. That's, you know, so if the rear leg is the supporting leg, it's always at the diagonal, which means that your hips and shoulders are pointing to the diagonal to where your center is. And it's very simple, because if you're in this position, so that my front is here, my rear foot is here, hips and shoulders are pointing this way. If I raise my arms towards my front, look at that, I'm in basic fighting position. Right? It's as simple as you can get. Boom, I'm in basic fighting position. So that's what we have that stance. All right, it's like hips and shoulders are to the diagonal, because you don't want to fight like this. You're going to fight like this. So that's the foot position reflects that simple fact. So let's go back to our hypothetical turn. We're just going to focus on the feet and the hips, right? So if I'm facing this way and I want to go do a 180-degree turn, the first thing I need to do is sit all the way onto the rear leg, so I can pick up the toes on front leg, and then I'm going to turn that front leg until it points to the diagonal. So there's no weight on it. I'm fully on that rear leg. My hips haven't really turned yet. And then I shift the weight, and it's the shifting of the weight that turns my hips. Once there's no more weight on that now front leg, I can pick up and let it float until it faces the right direction, right? So the important part is the supporting leg doesn't move, and you don't turn the knee or the hips yet, because you want to keep the alignment between the supporting foot and the supporting hip. Once the foot is in position and you shift, the shift in weight from side to side also automatically includes a rotation in the hip joint. So the shift, it's a shift in turn, right? Because you want to I want my hips to point in the same direction as my foot and my knee. So that way there's no pressure on that knee. So when I shift, I turn my waist. So then I point the same direction, right? So that's why there's a shift and turn. So you never just turn the foot and then shift, keeping your hips square. As you shift, you turn so that the more weight there is on your leg, the more you're in line with that supporting leg. So now I'm here, and once you're here, once you pick up now the empty leg, it just slides so that until it points in the right direction. And now I've finished my transition, right? So shift and turn, And what you're trying to do is to express the direction of the foot in the hips. So there's no sideway pressure on the knee, right? So when you turn, it's always going to be shift, shift and turn. Shift, shift and turn. Shift, shift and turn, right? Does that make sense?
Yep. On the back foot, turn the front without turning the waist, and then as you shift, the hips open if they're relaxed.
Yeah.
If they flop open.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now there's a bit of torque on this foot if it's still on the ground.
Yeah.
If I let the heel float up and let it pivot on the ball, it opens with the hips. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yeah. So that's the absolutely correct thing. So the thing to notice is that I bring my foot in. As I shift, I pick up the heel on this foot to release it. Because yes, if the foot stays flat, then you can't turn, you're stuck. And then the torsion is either in the knee or the ankle. So you want to immediately start picking up that heel so that you can turn, if you had to, and pivot on the ball of the foot. But you're gonna go and turn and be sufficiently seated on that rear leg that the foot can actually float and move. But yes, you should release the rear heel as soon as you can to allow movement in the hips, so that at no point are your feet stuck, right? You're never like with both feet flat on the ground and stuck. When I'm here, I'm pivoting on the heel. The minute my foot is down, I start shifting, and as soon as I can, I pick up the heel on that foot so it can rotate on the ball of the foot. So it's all about opening up the opening up the waist enough that that transition can work, right? And once you have it, it feels pretty good actually. You're like just right. You're just turning it.
Easy in that.
Right, boom, boom. But the important thing is, there's those micro adjustments where when I turn here, I don't just now turn and face this way, because now my feet are like a ballerina, right? So if I'm just turning on the heels, right, my feet are too close together. If all you do is turn on the heel, which is possible, but your feet are together, so there's always that slight shift to the side. That's why I keep saying that the foot floats, because if I transition here and simply turn my legs are too tight, so I need my foot to float to the side. If I turn here and I turn, my feet are too tight, so I need to float my foot to the side, right? So there's that moment where the foot readjusts, just glides across the floor, so that now you have the proper width, right? The proper separation of the feet. So there's always those little adjustments. And notice that what it really is, if you think of your hip, when you turn, your hip is moving through space. And your foot is just an extension of that movement in space. That if you don't turn, if you don't float that foot, what you're doing is you're preventing that hip from fully turning. So in order for it to turn, the foot has to turn. So again, it's the hips, it's maintaining the alignment between hip, knee, and foot, so they're actually relaxed and in line and connected. Which is also why you want to make sure that you have that commitment, to 100% on one leg, because that's what gives the freedom for the other leg to be placed where it needs to be. Right? So what it shows is that in our form, we're gonna have that 70-30 weight distribution, 70% on the rear, 30 on the front, or we're gonna be 100, or actually here we're still 70-30, right? So even if I'm in front-legged position, 70% on the front, 30% on the rear, right? Nice and solid. That's for the moments where we are expressing energy or receiving energy. And all the moments in between, we're 100% on one leg or 100% on the other, right? And this is where you see how actually the stepping in the form is actually very agile. You're never stuck. You're never planted, with 50-50 weight. That would be completely wrong. but you always have these moments where actually you're essentially on one foot and you can go and turn in any direction, right? So there's this kind of mobility, which is odd to think of in when thinking of Tai Chi, because we think of Tai Chi as being very slow. We're always very grounded, which is true.
That's the biggest thing I noticed between this and public form. The public form, you're often in positions where you would have to shift before you can move.
Yeah, exactly.
Here,
there's in the public form, having to be stuck and having to shift first before you step, that you never want that. And you can see if you do, like even if we look at the beginning of the 13 postures, grasp the sparrow's tail, press, seal it closed. It doesn't seem like the fastest, like in terms of footwork, but actually you're starting here and you're stepping, right? So the very beginning is here, ward off. And you can see that there's actually a lot of time that's just on that one rear leg. Boom. Grasp the sparrow's tail, press, and then here. Boom. There's right? See the footwork is actually quite fast. From seal it closed, right? From press, seal it closed is here, half step, push. So you've shifted weight like 3 times in a second when you do the application at speed, right? Drawing, push, pack, push. And so you're actually constantly shifting weight and you're ready to move and you have a foot that's ready. That transition drag out, right? You can see, if you start doing it slightly faster, you can see that actually you're constantly moving and you're often on that one leg. And it's because of that you have the ability to step fast. And right, so in doing the form slow, you're learning to be stable on one leg, right? To be stable and grounded on one leg, because actually that's the essence of stepping. Stepping is going from one foot to the next, to the next.
Leg, it gives you a big range of motion choice for where you go with the move.
Exactly, you have a huge range once you have that. So take that knowledge back into the stepping, the transition. So when you're here, think of in terms of like, oh, now I'm on that one leg, where am I gonna go? Oh, I'm gonna go that way, right? So the transition of the weight from one leg to the next is actually, it's really going, okay, now I'm here, which way am I gonna go? I have all these options now because I can step in any direction. So you're going from that planted, sit down. Okay, now I'm here on that rail, which way am I gonna go? I'm gonna go that way. All right, now I'm here. Which way am I going to go? I'm going to go that way. And that's why there's the emphasis on being single-legged in the transition. That's why it's so important. And you sit, foot, knee, and hip are in line. Now from here, which way, what's your direction of intent? And that's the direction that my front foot is going to go in. Right? That's essentially literally what you're doing, except that we're going to make it nice and small. All right, nice and relaxed. But really you're here and you're going, which way am I going to go? I'm going to go this way. Which way do I want to step? That way. Right? So really investing in that 100% weight on one leg. Because that's the essence of movement. And it will protect your knees at the same time because you're not twisting anything. So your knees are nice and safe. And if you do it at speed, now you actually have a lot of stepping. You have lots of possibilities for movement. You can step very fast because you're on that one leg and you can change directions, right, very, very quickly and switch foot. Notice the very first step that we learn in the 13 postures is that half step, right? Here, half step. So we're in the first section of the 13 postures, we never actually step forward. Right? The same foot, right? My right foot is always forward. So we never do a single full step in the first section of the 13 postures. The only step that we do is a half step. All right? Boom. Boom. So it's that, oh look, you can turn back and forth, forward, back, forward, back. That's the half step. And what it is I'm fully on the rear leg, fully on the front leg, fully on the rear leg, fully on the front leg, fully on the rear leg, fully on the front leg. All right, same principle. All right, so let's, right, those are the basics. So let's go through the actual form. So if we start here, facing, right, so we're all facing in the same direction. So that's our front. Those are our sides, back, diagonal, diagonal. When we start, feet are facing front. So when we start here, we shift the weight to the right leg, left toes point to the diagonal. And then shift and turn. And then rise up, the foot comes in. Right, and then we step and we do everything else. Right, so that's the same basic transition. It's what I'm talking about. We bring the foot to the diagonal. That's what determines our direction. And then we finish here. Right foot forward, left foot pointing to the diagonal. So we're going to sit down, bring the foot, so I'm 100% on this leg still. This front foot, the right foot is now pointed to the front diagonal. Then I shift the weight. Now left hand, left foot, circle and come up so that I can sit down and step for the ward off towards the cardinal. Huh? So the main transition is we go, the front foot was pointing to the cardinal, foot points to the diagonal, shift, left hand, left foot are like floating, like I was talking about before, so that now we can point to the cardinal. And then we do everything, we push, so we end with a push at the end of the section. Right foot is pointing to the diagonal, left foot is pointing to the cardinal. I want to go that way, I'm going to do 90-degree turn. So I sit down, bring the left foot in until it points to that diagonal, and then I shift, right hand, right foot, bring them in, sit down, ward off. Right? So very simple. Very simple. Just pick your direction, place the foot that's going to be supporting you to the diagonal, shift the weight, bring the front foot forward. Very simple. And the hands and the arms express that shift. When I'm here and I want to go that way, my hands just turn. Notice they just turn with that foot. Shift. Now this arm is dominant. And now notice this hand is simply expressing the same direction that I'm going in. Left hand circles. As simple as you can make it with the arms. So the arms are only an addition at the very end. There's a little tidbit of movement at the very end. All right. So we've turned. We've come here. Boom. So here at the end, same thing. We turn. We shift. Left hand, left foot, circle. Ward off. Yeah. All right, so it really is, especially with the arms, as relaxed and simple as possible. Notice if you really do it all integrated, when I turn and I shift the weight, I can pick up my left foot. It's gliding into position, but I don't even need to have it on the ground until I need it for ward off. I'm not saying that that's what you should be doing necessarily, but the potential is there, right? Because you've turned and your weight is 100% on that rear leg, during this entire transition here, you can do it without ever putting that foot down until you need it for ward off. All right? Yeah. So then you go boom, boom, boom. We end up with a push. So now we're going to do 90-degree turn, but for drag down. So we're here, and same idea. I'm here, I'm going to turn my foot. Since I want to go that way, my rear foot points to the diagonal. So foot to the diagonal, shift the weight 100%, and now I want to bring my right foot so it slides and it points forward. And then I do drag down. Now the hands for drag down are like this, but all you have to do, right? So you finish pushing, just relax. And then you let the hands fall along this diagonal. And as they fall along the diagonal, the foot, right? So it's really, you're here, and then the foot starts to turn and the hands follow. And then you shift. And the hands are simply going from one side to the next, right? So you're just drawing the hands in a diagonal across the body. There's a downward aspect to it because your hand is going to end up in front of your belly button. Right? You're brushing, somebody's trying to punch you in the gut and you're just going block, control. This is controlling your opponent's elbow. Block, control. Block, control, right? It's like, whew, you're doing this. Whew, whew. You're doing it as you, whew. And you can feel how, because we're stepping, and because there's that shift from one foot to the next, this is also an escape, right? Because my belly was here, I was getting punched. My belly was here, look at where I am now, because I've stepped. So I've literally removed my center from the point of impact. So it's not just an escape, it's also a shift. Right, I was facing here, I turn, see how I'm sliding to the side. So that's something comes this way and I go, whoop. Right, because my hips are traveling, so my entire body is traveling. So you want to have that sense of, like this can be drawing in, but then this is sliding to the side. And you can see if this.
One more time. I'm trying to see where you're getting the distance from.
The distance in the stepping?
Yeah, the sideways shift.
So, right, because I'm here, I finished pushing. So I sit down, bring the toe. So this is perfectly standard. But now I shift my weight here. And so this is where my entire body shifts to the side.
Okay, now I gotcha.
And then forward. So that shifting the weight from one foot to the next also shifts the body from one position to the other. All right. So that's what you should feel like it is like an escape. All right. This is what we would do in push hands, would be here, where the escape is the rotation. But here, because we have the space, not only is it a rotation, it's also a shift. So power's coming this way, and we go, whoop, let it, instead of being here, getting it, right, we turn, let it go through. That's the idea. All right, so transition is here, shift, and the foot slides forward, just glides on the ground until it's positioned where we need it to be. And if we want to do a 180 degree turn, because after, right, so we do a bump, 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 and then we're here and we play the P bump. And now we're going to turn and do a 180 degree turn. And it's simply the exact same principles, right? If I did play the P bump, sit on the rear leg, bring those toes until they point to the diagonal, shift the weight, and now that, in this case, my left foot slides until it's pointed in the right direction. And the arms, again, are just sliding at a diagonal. Right? So it's the exact same principles. Right? shift back, bring the toes, which brings the whole side of the body, shift, and then slide now empty leg until it's pointed in the right direction. Right? So exact same principles. And the arms are just moving with the hips. Boom, boom. And then for the third section, it's the exact same thing, except we do change the angle of the foot and then drag it down. So it's the exact same transition as from the first into the second section, right? And here we see again all these principles in line. We're here, bring the foot to the cardinal. So when we shift, now we're facing the diagonal because we still have that angle between rear foot and front foot, right? Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. So then we have the transition from press at the end of the third section, and we simply step back, shift back, and now we're exactly where we were before. We just turn, bring the foot, boom. Right? So from press, it's simply a matter of stepping back onto the rear toes, shift onto that rear leg, turn, bring the foot to the correct alignment, shift, boom. You do the exact same thing that we've been doing. So you're just looking for that chance to be fully seated onto that rear foot before you do, right? So you're fully seated onto that rear foot before you do any kind of turn. That's all. You're constantly just sitting on that rear leg, turn the toes, shift the weight. At all times. It's the same rules that applies to every single transition, right? So then the final one is at the very end. So we finished, right? So we're here, we step back, sit down, and we're gonna turn so we can finish the form. So we're finished, we're over here. All we do is we step back. It's just like all the other ones. Sit back onto that leg, turn, bring the foot so that it faces forward. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing as before. I'm going to shift the weight all the way here to free up this leg so that it can travel. In this case, it's going to come back to center and then separate again. But we're following the exact same principles that we've always seen. Right? First, you found your rear leg. So you shift the weight to the rear. Turn the foot so it points in the correct position, and then shift. Right? And all I'm doing with the arms is right hand, right foot come in, and then cross in front, and then we turn the hand and separate hand and foot. Then we do carry the tiger, and then the left foot comes in. Right? So you've had right foot come in and separates, to carry the tiger, and then the left foot comes in. Right? So, speaking of carry the tiger, let's do celestial tiger. Yeah, sorry.
Carry the tiger.
Yeah.
Let's see. Right hands on top. Feet are separated. Turn. And then.
Yep, exactly. So you come up from carry the tiger, turn the hands over and separate, and then come in. So yeah. So from here, carry the tiger. You're here. Separate. You go through this moment where you're basically in the basic posture, and then from here shift and bring the hands. Right. So up, turn, separate, ha. Moment of basic posture, then shift, come back in. So you go through the basic posture at the very end. All right? So let's do celestial tiger to close off this class. So, feet parallel, knees bent, hips are tucked, shoulders relaxed, spine is long. And raise the arms. Oh, basic posture. Inhale, palms down. Ha. Palms up. Drawing energy from the heavens. Ha. Pointing the pinkies forward. Ha. Rounding the back. Ha. Pointing up. Ha. Dropping the arms, opening the chest so the chest is pointing to the heavens. Ha. Then turning, bring the hands by the meridian, belt meridian, kidneys, and then ha. And the hands across the heart. Ha. Exhale. When the hands cross the heart, ha. Exhale. And again. Ha. 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 One more time. Cross the hands in front of the belly. Breath and belly. And feet together. And just take a bow. Finish this class. All right, thank you. Hideen.com. go there. All right, any questions?